one of the interesting topics we have Mansi Kedia, fellow from Agri, deliberating on competition issues in the digital economy. So over to you. The floor is with you, Mansi.
Thank you, Anand. And let me thank all the organizers of the Indian School on Internet Governance for inviting me. I'm actually really delighted to be here to share with you what, according to me, are some of the challenges that face platform competition. I have been working at eCareer, and our team has been working on some of these issues, trying to build empirical evidence for competition issues in platform markets for the Indian economy, but there is a lot of literature that has evolved and it continues to remain a challenge all over the world. So, this is not something that is unique to India, but unique across several markets. And we've seen competition authorities such as that of the US completely U turn on how they looked at competition and how competition authorities actually dealt with anti abuse. There's a lot to talk about, but I know I have 10 minutes, so I'm trying to focus on a few things and then let the last 5 minutes remain for any additional questions. I'll beg your pardon if I am oversimplifying or overcomplicating, but I've tried to keep it a bit focused by just highlighting a few things that make these markets and make competition regulation for platforms particularly challenging. So let me begin by the first thing, which is that platforms are two-sided markets. And economic literature on two-sided markets is not very old, but at least a couple of decades old. And what two-sided markets essentially mean is that you have buyers and sellers, and they interact or exchange by means of an intermediary, or here what we call a platform. So there are two sides that are simultaneously engaging with each other as against a one-sided market that we understand. And the examples of digital platforms can be Netflix, Amazon, Facebook. But even if we look at traditional markets, two-sided markets have existed, and a good example would be a mall. So the two sides of the market when it comes to a mall are, the store owners who lease out space or who buy space in a mall to sell their products, and the buyers like you and me who actually go to the mall to buy things. Another good example that was way before the digital platforms is newspapers. And in newspapers, you have advertisers, you have people putting out classifieds, and several others on one side of the market, and then there are consumers and readers like you and me who are reading these newspapers and paying for that content. So even before digital platforms actually came into being, two-sided markets did exist. It's just that I think there wasn't a need, or there wasn't too much discussion around it. What are two-sided markets and what makes them different? One of the key characteristic of two-sided markets is what is called network effects. And what are network effects? It's a phenomena. We can understand it as a phenomena where increased number of participants on one side of the market can increase the value for other participants in the market or to the overall network. And this could be classified into direct or indirect, in the sense that if I am a consumer and more consumers get onto a platform, then the entire network of consumers gain from it. And the indirect effect would mean that if I am a consumer and I enter a platform, then the other side of the platform, let's say sellers of products or other merchants or vendors, are likely to benefit from it. Let me actually explain using an example. So think of Facebook, right? If I am on Facebook and all my friends and families join Facebook, then it becomes more valuable. Then the platform becomes more valuable for me and for everybody around me, because there's just so many people sharing much more content and making the platform more useful. This is an example of a direct network effect. And if we are looking at advertisers, who are another side of the Facebook's market, then having more consumers on the market is also valuable to them, because that is the number of people they can actually use to target their ads to. So and this then becomes an example of an indirect effect. And these direct and indirect network effects are actually that helps to make the platform bigger and bigger. As more users join the platform becomes bigger, more value is created, more people start subscribing to it, or pay or merchants start paying these platforms for making more for advertising, and they not only become bigger in size but also start earning more money, become more powerful, start to dominate in terms of content, start to dominate in terms of views, start to dominate in terms of attention. So a key characteristic that arrives from the manifestation of network effects is what in economics we call tipping point, which essentially means that platforms are just meant to be big. They start to grow bigger because of these network effects, and once they become big and bigger, they tip towards becoming a monopoly. So and this then again leads you to the problem of competition, that interestingly earlier, like this is even before they used measures of efficiency, size was a problem. So if we were to think of the digital competition and platform competition, size is a given. You Any platform that is reasonably successful will be big in size. So size cannot therefore become a parameter for determining anti abuse or abuse of competition. And competition authorities need to look beyond. So here is one key characteristic, and one that becomes a challenge, challenging the traditional norm of size as a problem to anti abuse and anti competition. The second sort of slightly more technical aspect is related to price. So I'm sure a lot of you understand that there are two types of markets, very basically two types of markets: a monopoly and a market that is competitive. And in a monopoly market, you're likely to see higher prices, and in a competitive market, the sellers are price takers and the price is going to be lower. This is our general understanding. But in case of two-sided markets, we don't look at price levels, we look at what is called the price structure. And what I mean by a price structure is that a platform determines price on both sides of the market, looking at the demand elasticities on the two sides of the market. So you'd be familiar with, I mean, I'm sure all listeners are familiar with this, that as consumers on the platform, users like you and me, we generally don't pay for any service or for access to a platform, barring a few premium services, or maybe in case of some media entertainment platforms, most of the services that as consumers we get on the platforms are zero priced. And on the other hand, the business side of the platform, or the merchants or the vendor side of the platforms, where demand is a bit more inelastic, where people don't care so much about the price. They're like, okay, even if this platform is charging me 1,000 rupees to advertise, I'll be okay. They won't care about, oh, this platform charges 990, or this platform charges 800. They're not going to distinguish their choice of platform based on price, while the consumer may be. So in that sense, the business side of the platform becomes much more price inelastic, and platforms therefore try to price that side of the market versus the consumer or the user side of the market, making making this a price structure. So and therefore, for a competition authority that is looking at price levels, a zero priced market is not going to get them much, is not going to get them too far. And therefore we have the emergence of what again is key characteristics of platform competition: non-price parameters of competition. And what are these non-price parameters of competition? They could be the quality of service, they could be the quality of the content, they could be the privacy norms or of that the platform follows, they could be consumer choice. So they could be a host of other things that are not related to price, that help consumers and users actually determine their choice of which platform to go to. And let me sort of end by saying one thing, is that because of these emergence of non-price parameters, you also have different regulatory authorities that have now become important for the competition assessment, or at least for a holistic assessment of competition. So if we are looking at, let's say, quality and competition together, then the quality monitor, which is probably going to be your Consumer Protection Act, or the authorities that are looking at consumer protection, to work together with the competition authority in order to resolve the problem in a more holistic way. If we are looking at privacy norms and competition, yet again we will have the in India, probably the Data Protection Authority for when it will be institutionalized. But in other countries, a data regulator or a data governance manager along with the Competition Authority. So we cannot look at competition in a silo anymore. We cannot look at data privacy in a silo anymore. We cannot look at consumer protection in a silo anymore. All of these regulatory authorities probably need to work together to make a more holistic decision towards governance of platforms. And we already see that trend sort of emerging in countries like Australia, where their consumer protection authority and their competition authority and their privacy regulator work together to be able to provide a coordinated approach to regulating platforms. So
Thank you,
let
Mansi,
me
for that.
stop here. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yes,
yeah. Let
sorry
me
for
stop
that.
here.
Yeah, sorry for
No.
that. There are two questions in the chat. One is the can market competitiveness be facilitated effectively using market uh, effects, and how?
Can you repeat that?
Can market competitiveness be facilitated effectively using network effect? From Prabhat.
Yes, so yeah, so using network effects, right? So that makes sense. It, I mean, there's a yes and a no there. So while like I explained the part where network effects help a platform become bigger and bigger, but there is also a flip side. It's like a double-edged sword, if you really, if you will, where any negative spiral can actually lead to downsizing of the platform. And an example that comes to mind was the WhatsApp privacy policy change that led to a trigger in favor of Signal. We may have thought of that as overshooting, where a negative spiral. I want to leave WhatsApp. My friends want to leave WhatsApp. My office colleagues want to leave WhatsApp. So that network effect sort of started spiraling, keeping WhatsApp's dominant position in check. So it is possible, but it may not always work. So it is something that you know authorities need to guard against. It can help a platform become bigger very quickly, and also reduce very quickly. So it can work both ways, but something that we need to always note as a red flag and need to monitor.
One more question over here. So, given that social media has largely become a monopoly market with few players dominating this is causing unintended consequences on the safety, trust, health, etc. How do we kind of correct the market? Even this question, I was also thinking of, because like GAFAM and BAT from Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and these companies are targeting consumer data. So, like Team Berners-Lee is coming up with Solid. So, do you have any take on that?
So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's not just social media. If you look at any other platform category, you'll find dominance of firms. So, if you're looking at ride sharing, it's Uber and Ola. If you're looking at e-commerce, it's Amazon and Flipkart. It's it is the nature of platform markets. Like I said, you'll see dominance in the market. The key question is whether these dominant platforms are actually abusing their position or not. And the question that was posed moves a little bit away from just purely competition. It's also about a lot of other social factors where they start to sort of drive the content, and the content seems to drive the social narrative, and that can have much more I think devastating consequences than just abuse of market power in terms of economic consequences. So yes, it can be checked in the sense that the there are lots of propositions being made in terms of with regard to access to data. So if you look at Singapore's model, I think they're amongst the first countries that have been able to arrive at a model of data sharing, some of which they've already implemented. And it required a solid amount of coordination, not only between their regulators and government departments, but also with stakeholders. That, okay, are you willing to price your data at this level? Do you think that the value of your data is X rupees or X dollars? Which is very important, because these companies are also investing a lot in building analytics. It's not just the data. So you cannot shortchange them by saying that no, 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 because this is data, this is a public good, I'm going to take it all away from them. That, to my mind, also seems a bit unfair. We have to find a middle ground for data sharing and data portability that can help I guess, control some amount of market power. There is also a proposition on breaking up of these firms. So you want to see WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook as separate entities where they're not sharing information across each other. That's the other proposal. And but I think more than all of this, there needs to be a lot of consumer education and awareness on what these platforms can do and how they can sort of dominate the way we think and perceive and our opinions, which goes a little beyond, like I said, competition, but I think becomes increasingly important as one of those negative consequences that we want to avoid from of a dominant platform in social media or any other market for that matter.
So there is one question from Pratik. Thank you for insights. How can regulatory organizations like CCI quantify non-price parameters like quality of service, privacy, etc.?
So, Pratik, thanks for your question. There is, in fact, CCI is very cognizant and and has acknowledged this. And I think the WhatsApp case is a signal that they are going to be looking at other non-price parameters of competition. The other thing that I feel about CCI is that they're currently in a wait and watch. Is also because I think as a market, India has not seen the maturity that other markets have, and I'm basing this on a consumer survey and a business survey that we did at eCreer, where the general awareness of consumers with regard to how platforms work is extremely low. And therefore, even whether or not, so the fact that, and we asked a specific question on does privacy of platforms impact you, and we had a few responses, so we were happy about that, but the proportion of those responses were really small. So it's good that CCI is cognizant. I think they need to collect a lot more empirical evidence before they actually start to regulate it. And I think they will need to do this in coordination with other departments and other regulators. To get this going in a real sense, and not have things lined up in court and a host of other disputes where there's regulatory arbitrage for players. So it needs to be much more coordinated, and it needs to be taken slowly and steadily. uh, that's what I think.
Yeah, thanks Mansi for that. It was really insightful.